If you are like I was when I was in the early stages of my development as a jazz trombone player, you might listen to the greats of this music or maybe listen to your peers who are sounding just a little better than you and think, man, they must just know something that I don't quite get, and that's why they sound so good. Now, I would never say that there are any secrets or fix-alls or magic bullets to becoming a good improviser, but there are a few key under-discussed realizations that if you take them into the practice room and put in the time, they can go a long way towards helping you take the next step as an improviser. What's up, everyone? Thanks for joining me this week. Shawn Bell here. It is good to be here at the end of the summer of 2025. For the last couple of months, I've been releasing mostly really short content, pretty short videos and all that sort of stuff because I've been in the middle of a really huge house renovation, which has been sucking up a lot of my time. But here, we're at the end of the summer. I'm all wrapped up with my house and I'm back to making some more detailed-oriented videos, and that is what today is going to be. I would really encourage you to check out the free handout that's available over in the virtual studio today, just because there's a bunch of licks on it that are really useful to take into the practice room that are going to support some of the concepts that we are going to talk about today. So let's get into it. We're talking about a few of the really key realizations that I've had over the last 20 plus years of working on improvisation that have been very important to my development and I think can be useful to you as well. These are things that don't really get taught in school or in a lesson or that sort of stuff. They're a lot of times things I think you just come to realize through playing, but hopefully we can talk about them today and they will help you to take some of those next steps. All right, let's jump in with our first key realization that it's taken me, 20 years to learn. This one is that you don't have to play changes all the time to sound great. This one is one I really learned way too late in my career. I grew up playing in school and went to music school and all that kind of stuff. So it was really kind of enforced on me that, Shawn, you got to learn how to play changes. And obviously, we do want to learn how to manipulate the harmony to build good solos. But learning how to play not in such a harmonically driven way is one of the most important things you can do to sound like a pro player. Tons of great solos from the masters work this way. And when we transcribe, we tend to really focus on, let's look at this cool lick, or let's look at this cool way this person uses some alterations on this chord. And we tend to gloss over some of the more melodic and diatonic elements. Those are oftentimes the most important elements in the solo. They are actually a lot of times most of the solo. Not all the time. There are certainly lots of different approaches. So you really got to make sure you're checking those out when you are transcribing, but also when you are practicing. It obviously is really cool to practice tunes in this fashion. But you've also got to think about what's going on big picture. So this section of Bye Bye Blackbird has a bunch of 2-5-1s back to F major. So we could totally hit G to C, whatever. But the whole section is really an F major key area. And really thinking in terms of mostly F major, maybe a little bit of attention to chord tones, but really building ideas that are very F major oriented is something that we really need to develop and carve out time in the practice room for. Just jumping in here with a little retake. I had a small audio issue with this next example we're about to hear when I originally recorded it, so I had to come back a couple days later and re-record that example. So here it is, our diatonic example. I really learned this lesson not through playing jazz, but really through playing commercial music and playing pop gigs and playing with wedding bands, where sometimes you would be expected to solo on tunes that don't really have a lot of harmony. And all that stuff you've been practicing of learning 2-5-1 licks and learning bebop ideas, it doesn't necessarily work the same way. And you really have to learn how to make compelling solos by just staying in one key. A real challenge if you spend all your time thinking about, okay, well, how am I going to apply this next diminished lick I'm working on? That brings us to our second important realization, and that is that key centers are more important than chords. I think this is a pretty commonly cited fact among sort of jazz pedagogues, but when the rubber hits the road, it can be a little confusing about how we actually think about this for some players. So we're on Bye Bye Blackbird today, so let's look at the bridge. The first half of the bridge, we have an F7 chord for 2 measures, and then we have a A minor 7 flat 5 to a D7, which eventually resolves to a G minor chord. So when we see that F7, the way I would have been taught about key centers when I was a young musician is that when we see F7, we're in the key of B flat. So that F7 dominant chord is Mixolydian, so it's going to be the 5th mode of B flat. So when you see F7, you want to think about B flat. To me, that doesn't really lead us in quite the right direction, even though it is actually true. It can lead us to ideas that sound like this. On sort of the flip side of this challenge of thinking about key centers or not, when we get to that A minor 7 flat 5 chord, again, if we look back in time, I would have been taught that that's a 6-modal melodic minor. And then when we get to D7 flat 9, I might think it's an altered scale or a diminished dominant scale. This is, again, correct, but can sometimes clog up the works when we're trying to think about how we're going to navigate this set of changes. So to really know what's going on here from a key center standpoint, we've got to look at some context. So when we see this first chord, this F7 chord, we know that, yes, it could fit into B flat, but does it fit into B flat here? Is it part of a 2-5-1? Does it resolve to B flat eventually later? To me, neither of these things happen. So for me, I'm still thinking that that F7 chord, even though it has an E flat in it, is still a F key center. It's just that it happens to have an E flat in it instead of an E natural. And so I'm still going to mostly think about F ideas. Now, when I get to this 2-5-1 to G minor, A minor 7 flat 5 to D7 to G, rather than thinking about those individual chord scales for each chord, that again is totally correct and is a way you can think if you want, but when you're just getting going on understanding how to manipulate harmony, you will be better off, in my opinion, thinking that that's all G harmonic minor for those 2 bars. This is a great way to navigate through minor 2-5s, is by thinking about that this is a G harmonic minor key center. I might think about the chord tones that are present on A and on D, maybe start and end my ideas on those, and then eventually resolve to G minor. But to me, that is such a more streamlined way to think about how to navigate those chord changes. And you will find this in many of the solos of the greats, where you can really clearly tell the way they're manipulating the ideas that they were probably thinking that this was G harmonic minor in a situation like this, and then resolving to just maybe G minor pentatonic, G Dorian, something like that when we get there. Our third realization that I had that really helped me take some nice forward steps in my playing is that using more alterations in my ideas doesn't necessarily make me hip. Practicing improvisation can really lend itself to sort of a maximalist approach. You know, we think that more notes are better, more alterations are better, more outside ideas are better, all this sort of stuff. And while that can be cool sometimes, you might find that if you're not using these alterations or more kind of ideas that stretch the harmony to build ideas, and you're just sort of putting them in there because you think they're going to make you sound hip, for example, always playing a sharp 11 on a major 7 chord. That's a sort of a classic jazz trope that every tune ends on major 7 sharp 11. Well, is there an idea there? Is there a reason that we're playing that color, or are we just doing it just to do it? That doesn't necessarily lead it to us being hip. It sort of ends up being a caricature of what improvisation is. So to work on this, we need to make sure we are giving specific time in the practice room to, can I play just diatonically? Can I play ideas that just stay within the scale? Now, you might have some accidentals as you use things like approach notes and closures, passing tones, things of that nature, but they are not really the leading part of the idea, and it's not sort of the basis of what you are playing. Now, it's not that alterations are bad. It's something that you should have control over as well, but they really need to be ideas. We shouldn't just be, plugging in a sharp 9 or a flat 9 just because. They need to really be part of an idea that we are hearing. A lot of times when we use alterations, we are implying other tonalities over a key or things of that nature, and there are really kind of specific sounds that really lend themselves to certain types of alterations. And so we need to practice using those as well. Fourth and final important realization for this week is that improvisation is a team sport. This is one I am still constantly trying to get better at. Now, as I just said, improvisation tends to lead itself to more. More is always better. We are the soloist, we are the focus of the attention. But the best way that you can sound better is letting the rest of the band support you. Your rhythm section colleagues are just waiting for a chance to play something that makes what you play sound better. Are you giving them that chance to do so? Once you become open to these sort of opportunities, you can start setting up places for the other players to have a moment to sound great in your solo. This is in turn going to make you sound great. Now, this comes from leaving space. This comes from being very, very clear with melodic choices, especially with rhythmic choices. So the rhythm section knows exactly where you're going to take a little step back, they can come forward, and then you're going to come in again with the next idea. Now, this is the absolutely best investment on how to sound better, is basically by making somebody else do the work for you. Now, none of these things this week were like, go practice this lick or go practice this scale. These are all bigger picture things and can seem like, okay, Shawn, well, I heard what you had to say. I'll try to think about some of those things. No, you got to take it into the practice room. You have to practice, can you play diatonically? You have to practice, can I play without caring about the changes, or maybe practicing without knowing the changes? It doesn't just work automatically when you take it on the bandstand. You have to invest time in these things. You have to invest time in how do I learn how to leave space in my solo so that way somebody else can say something. These are the things that'll really take you from just sounding sort of like a student level player where, maybe you're playing the changes, the tunes, that sort of stuff, to really actually be making some music and really working on, I think, the fun parts of being an improviser, not just sort of the mechanical parts of putting it all together and making the harmony work and all that kind of stuff. Cool. We'll see you in the woodshed.